Good evening. Good evening, everybody. I think it's time we should start. I'm Chris Baker, and I'm welcoming you on behalf of the Siam Society. Thank you very much for braving the rain tonight. Luckily, the typhoon has not hit, so it's not too bad. I thought we were going to get bucketed out, but not so bad. Nicolas came, as he tells us in his biography, he became a nut about comics from his childhood, and he's managed to turn it into a career, and that is a considerable success. He came here to Thailand in 2014, 2015, around that time, and hit just right to have someone in Chulalongkorn University who could understand someone coming along and saying, I want to teach courses about art, comic art, and this sort of stuff, which was very lucky. You know, Chula is not famed for being the most sort of avant-garde university, so he was very lucky. And then he produced in a remarkably short time this wonderful book of Thai comics, the Red Book, which you have seen downstairs, which is remarkable in many ways. It's remarkable because in order to do that, he found a whole lot of material which was mouldering away in people's attics and cellars. So it's a feat of rescue for one point. And the other is that it fits these comics, this art form, into the cultural context quite beautifully, which makes it a really super book to read, and I loved it. So, and unfortunately, he was going to give this lecture earlier, and it got put off because his parents turned off and turned out to have COVID, so he had to cancel. So luckily, tonight we have him talking about Thai comics and nation building. Nicolas, please.
Thank you. Okay, setting up my timer. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for to the Siam Society for inviting me and having me tonight. So I have so many things to say and so many things to show, so I will try to show a maximum of things. And indeed, as a starter, one thing I'm trying to do is to create the Thai Comics archives, which are now in my office at Chulalongkorn University, where I try to gather, collect all these artifacts. They're difficult to find, and you can find them on my website. And I've also a listing with all the comics. I went through half of the comics. It's in Thai and in English, and you can actually, if you are interested in research about Thai comics, you are welcome to have access to all these comics that I gathered starting from the 1920s for the oldest. Part of my work was, as I started this project at Chulalongkorn University, my faculty, the Faculty of Communication Arts, asked me to make my first research some 7 years ago, and I wanted to do it about Thai comics. I first was more interested in indie comics and the independent comic scene, and the faculty, the research board asked me, yes, it's nice to do about contemporary comics, but what is coming before? I thought, well, probably nothing, because nobody is talking about anything. All the contemporary cartoonists were not aware of what was produced before 2000, basically. And then it opened Pandora box, because it turned out that there was a massive production of comics in Thailand since the turn of the previous century, and that all these had been lost to memory, damaged by rain, flood, bookworms, and a lack of interest and regard for this art form. That came late because comics were highly regarded before the 1970s, and after the 1970s there will be a shift in the perception of comics art. I will go back to the start, quickly mention that cartoons are already framed in King Chulalongkorn's residence. We know that thanks to Carl Bock, a Norwegian explorer who was visiting the summer residence and noted that in the palace of King Chulalongkorn, the summer palace, there were cartoons from Vanity Fair that were actually framed, and not probably because of the cartoon themselves, but about how the Englishmen were dressed. I think it was more an interest in fashion than in cartooning itself. At the same time, we have an interest for the West and Western arts, part of the Civili program, which was to civilize Thailand, Siam at the time, as a way to counter the expansion and the expansion of France and the United Kingdom in the region. Kings like King Mongkut, then King Chulalongkorn invited artists, Italian artists, to update the different art forms, architecture, painting, and so on. And they invited Carlo Rigoli, Italian painter, who with Prince Naris will merge Siamese content, Buddhist stories, but then turn them with a neoclassic or more classic European style. And here we have our first Hermit, who is facing Chuchok in the tale of Prince Vesantra, the last rebirth before becoming Gautama Buddha. And it's an interesting image because it introduced two aspects that I will be developing today. The idea that we have a character, the Hermit, who is part of the serious storyline of the Vesantra Jataka, about reaching the virtues, the perfect virtue of generosity, and facing him is Chuchok, where there is a subplot in the Vesantra Jataka which brings the Vesantra Jataka with some humor, for instance, and create a balance between the quest of Prince Vesantra and the quest of Chuchok, which is usually seen as a very humoristic or buffoon character. So, as I mentioned, there is Siam is trying to modernize itself as fast as it can by borrowing elements from Western cultures to go against the pretension of the claim of colonization, of bringing civilization to the area. And King Rama VI will be discovering in England during his studies, will discover cartooning and political cartooning. He will become fascinated by political cartooning. He will become himself a cartoonist. He made hundreds and hundreds of cartoons, and he considered that it was a really effective way to address political issues or to convey propaganda or an agenda. At the time, mostly against Germany, which was expanding fast. So, and it's usually considered, he's usually considered as the first cartoonist in Siam, but he was actually not. Comics are in Thailand, in Siam, are as old as 1906, 1907, with these woodcut prints, which are in tune with the production of the time at a global level, which are exotic fantasies. It was common to have short comics presenting animals, fierce animal beasts, or jokes about ethnic population and so on. And more interestingly, the real start because these were anecdotal. They were published in a school magazine. The real start of comics publishing is within the Dusit Summit Royal Gazette, made by attributed to a nobleman, Prayat Anusat Chitrakorn. And this is a beautiful comics page in the Royal Gazette presenting a man who claims that he mastered the new modern way of filing books and documents. He wants to prove that, tries to file documents the modern Western way, but completely fails in the end and gets angry, which already shows that tension between tradition and modernity, or borrowed ideas from the West. But this will all backfire because King Rama VI introduced comics and cartoons, promote comics and cartooning in Siam, create nationwide contest, asking everyone to send him cartoons, and the winners will become the first editorial cartoonist, especially Pleng Traipin and Sem Sumanan. It backfires because these artists will start criticizing the absolute monarchy. These are amazing, and mostly Sem Sumanan, inspired by Punch, the British Punch magazine, will draw cartoons. What is really surprising is that he is actually drawing himself, which was something uncommon at the time at a global level. It's autobiographical. So he's showing himself being attacked by the tiger of gambling because he was trialed for defamation because he revealed the corruption of the police in gambling dens. And here he is making a harsh comment against man that is number 6 and which is assumed to be Rama the 6th. These comics and cartoons will participate in raising the discontent against the regime and the political status quo, and lead and participate actively in the 1932 revolution. Meanwhile, other cartoonists keep on developing comics art. This is from the 1929-1931 by Chan Suvarnapunya, who is using panels, balloons, but what is also really unique and interesting in Thailand, in Siam, is the use of poetry. And that is quite unique in the world. I think only China has some examples, but during decades, the production of comics in Thailand will be linked to poetry. And here is actually introducing Klong Lokanit parables, proverbs, and he turns them into short comics as explainers. And this particular one with the man dreaming, then waking up, is probably inspired by the comics from Winsor McCay, American cartoonist famous for Little Nemo. Sadly, the microfilm is too damaged to get a clear copy, so I only have a photograph of the microfilm. This is an amazing comics by Sawas Jutarop right after the 1932 revolution. It is called Citizens Have Equal Rights. It shows this man, Ped, who has a really surly wife, and he has absolutely no freedom there. He goes in the street and see a general on a tank right after the 1932 Siamese revolution, claiming that no, the power is ours. It is ambiguous because the power actually might be ours to the general, or maybe ours to all the people. The next is inspired, go get drinks, is able to face his wife on a stool, but then gets beaten up because she is not going to give the power away, which might be read as the fact that the new government is not going to give the power away either, which turns out to be actually true, because the new government after 1932 1932 will enforce censorship more strongly than before 1932. And so Savas Jutarop will make a short comics. It's the first time we know of that we have a serialized story. So over 6 installments, he's making a long-form story talking about a news reporter who is going to be attacked by, and so there are a lot of stereotypes, ethnic stereotypes of here Chinese, will be able to stop a prostitution ring, but then will be accused of defamation, will be jailed, his editor will be jailed, and these comics reveal all the different, the censorship happening at the time towards many new editors, newspaper, and cartoonists. Cartoonists are therefore afraid to make cartoons, political cartoons, and Savas Jutarop will decide to stop commenting the news and rather adapt folktales. And here is his first adaptation from Trachai Surya, introducing a character that looks like Popeye, because Popeye was really famous at the time. This is the Kek Guruma. And again, we have an introduction of poetry at the start of the story, then adapting the whole story. His next adaptation is much more important because it introduces a famous character of the time, Kun Muen, who is, the face is directly borrowed from Popeye, but he has nothing else in common with Popeye because he usually never uses his fist. He is a trickster and he is the courier of the king. He is also playing the role of a buffoon because he is the only one who can actually talk back to the king. Usually kings are respected in these comics, but here, as a buffoon, he is able to answer back to the king. All these are serialized in different newspapers, and they will be later collected as comic books. This is an example of a collected comic book from 1939, the adaptation of Sangsil Pachai, for instance. And we arrive, after that too long introduction, to our first Hermit in comics. It is an adaptation of Onwishai Kawi, which is a non-canonical Jataka. And I have brought you... So the actual copy, it is, as far as I'm aware, the only existing copy remaining of that narrative. It was collected in the 1930s by someone, I probably will never know who cut all the pages, cut vertical stripes, and then bind it by hand. And this was discovered 2 years ago in a box in an attic along 1,500 other comics pages from the 1930s. And it was a major discovery for me and I think for Thai comics art, because all these were lost. They were not available at the National Library or anywhere. So it's the first time we actually could see what was produced in the 1930s, and I will let you take a look, but please, it's the only copy, so make sure not to destroy it. And Onwishai Kawi is the story of orphaned tiger cub and of an orphaned calf who become friends after killing the mother of the tiger cub. And they are friends, they wander famished in the forest up until Hermit arrives, finds them, and thinks that this is too awkward and that it's too much difference in the natural order, so he decides to normalize the situation by turning them into kids, because too much difference is wrong. And so he decides to take care of them. Savas Jutarop was an amazing cartoonist, filling his comics with small little details like that bird on the mustache. He's teaching them, they don't want to learn because they are youngsters. and enters Kun Wen, who is in all these adaptations a recurring character. He is always making a cameo, and he's actually becoming the main character, often helping the prince in need. It's an interesting meeting because the Hermit, usually seen as the holder of wisdom, of knowledge, lore, magical lore, training, usually in folktales, prince go to see the Hermit in the jungle, and the Hermit is going to train them to become wise rulers and fierce combatants. Here he is facing the buffoon Kun Wen in a very nice meeting. But then the tone suddenly changed, and we have the first time the Hermit is actually making a comment that is not related to the tale itself. And he says, we have now to equip them with magic skills and knowledge. The youth is the art of the nation. If they are afraid to fight, it will be difficult for them to find a place to live. And this reference to the nation and the youth being the art of the nation is probably informed by the context, 1936. We are in full spread of the Japanese Empire, a lot of tension in Europe. And this, the building of the Thai nation is also in progress. And so we have the Hermit out of the blue making a comment about training the next generation to fight. So there is a militarist kind of undertone here, and also to give them wisdom, knowledge, and so on. This is something that is confirmed by another page coming from 1940. And it's an interesting page because the comics adaptation here of Chayachet is suddenly interrupted. So there was a daily episode of the Chayachet dance drama, but on that day it's interrupted on the left, and we have Kun Wen who suddenly make a reference to current events. So he's warning the children about the airstrike drills on Air Defense Training Day, because we are in 1940 and there is the threat of invasion. And so Kun Wen, as a buffoon, is able to cross timelines, because that is something we can do when you are a clown or a buffoon. You have that liberty to do asides or to bend in a way or warp the narrative continuum. That is allowed when you are a clown or a buffoon in Like theater or in comics in general. So he is able to reach from the Ayutthaya time to present time and address the children, also introduced as being the future of this country. So we have here an interesting message and bend of the narrative continuum. Which leads me, surprisingly maybe, to Belgian comics. Because if there is one thing that surprised me, and I don't think it's Belgocentrism, it is the fact that there is nothing that looks or that feels more like a Belgian comics than a Siamese comics. Probably for reason I will explain. So Belgium, famous character is Tintin, starting in 1929. Hergé wanted to have the first adventure of Tintin in America, but with the influence of the Abbot Wallet, who was his mentor, he is pushed to make propaganda comics against communism because it's threatening Christian values, introducing some stereotypes of Chinese as torturers. Then he's pushed to make pro-colonial comics, which is Tintin in Congo, managed to make his comics about Tintin in America, and then meets a Chinese artist in Brussels who is going to introduce him to Chinese art, Chinese painting, and show him the plight of the Chinese people being invaded by the Japanese Empire. And again, The Thompson brothers are acting like buffoons. They are the ones that can bend the narrative continuum without breaking the story. And here we have Tintin, and a complete change of depiction of the Chinese people thanks to Chang, who introduced him to the rich culture of China. Sadly, the Japanese are still depicted as awful stereotypes. All that to mention that the creation of the clear line style, the famous style of Hergé, which is to use a uniform, clear, strong line without etchings, where everything has the same importance, every object, animal, character, important or not, has the same attention in terms of the line. And that is informed by two things, is that he is merging in his style American comics, who were already using a form of clear line style, and he is merging that with Chinese art, where everything is important. Everything is connected, the tree to the roots, to the soil, to the mountain, all is one with everything. And he's merging Chinese art, American comics together to perfect this clear line style, mixed with his obsession with purity and being pure-hearted, and the Scutism ideal. The first version of Tintin was named Totor and was a Scut, and the Catholicism, the fear of sin, he's obsessed with that, and he's also merging that pure, clean goal, aspiration within this style. So this is at the same time, so it goes on many levels. And I'm talking about that because this is 1935, one of the most famous Tintin sequence, the Tintin in the Blue Lotus, when he is in the Chinese vase. And why I'm making all this detour, it's because 1 year before Jamnong Rodari, one of the greatest cartoonists I've ever seen, in Siam, is actually making that panel. When the more I research about early Siamese comics, the more I see these kind of links, which are completely coincidental. There is no reason to believe that Hergé was able to get a Siamese newspaper and read Jamnong Rodari comics, or the other way around. But we end up with these same kind of images, surprising coincidences, probably because Siamese artists and Hergé were blending American influence with Chinese influence all together, leading to the same kind of results, surprising results. That is one among others. The difference is that Belgian comics and Hergé are always avoiding risque elements, while Siamese comics are filled with risque elements, sexual innuendo, and so on. But it's an interesting aspect, also because Scutism is going to be really important in Siam, introduced by King Rama VI, promoted by King Rama VI, introducing these same values of respect of the elderly, but also respect to the kingship and respect to the nation, and so on. So that is another link we can make between Belgium and Siam at the time. It's the importance in comics of reference to Scutism. And this I can skip, as I know that I'm already late on my talk. So, other amazing page. Sawaschutarop was an amazing artist. Here, an adaptation of the Prapai Mani with Sutsakorn. 3-year-old Sutsakorn already able to talk and do magic feats. And the impact of Sawaschutarop, his comics are so successful that all the other cartoonists will do the same and decide to make their own adaptation of Thai folktales, Thai classic literature. And this is a beautiful example of Prapai Mani. introducing anachronism. Suddenly they are singing, the cave is turned into, the underwater cave is turned into a radio station, the ogress is able to hear it, and the animals too. Another beautiful example of the characters being dressed into then contemporary attire within a set mostly happening in a Ayutthaya setting. We move to realist comics with M. Vejakorn, who was trained by Carlo Rigoli, the Italian artist that I mentioned earlier. So he will learn neoclassic and European techniques of representation. He's famous for his ghost illustration and will make one of the very first realist comics in 1938 by adapting Sritananshai in comics format, Story of a Trickster. He was an amazing artist. So many things are still to be discovered. His adaptation of Ratchatirat from 1952-1953 is one of the most beautiful comics I've seen, the covers and the panels. And he will adapt and illustrate many books of classic literature. He was one of the most demanded artists of the time. He will here illustrate the Prapamani, so we have the Hermit, Sutsakorn, and the Mermaid Mum. Here on Wishai Kawi, we again have the Hermit meeting the calf and the cub before turning them into small boys. This one is an illustration, like classic illustration, like every 20 pages you have an illustration. These are more interesting. They are graphic narratives. I don't know if I can call them comics because there is no clear closure between panels. It is highly, so there are hundreds of illustrations, but they do not act as a classic comics with a clear moment-to-moment transition than in many comics. Other side note, he will also adapt the life of Buddha at the request of Thai Watanapanit at a time where Buddhism is being promoted in school, so there is a new curriculum insisting on Buddhism, respect to royalty, respect to parents, respect to religion, because it is a time where Buddhism seems an interesting tool to keep communism away. He is asked to adapt the life of Buddha, but he decides, surprisingly, to adapt a book that is not an Asian book. He decides to go for the Sir Edwin Arnold's Light of Asia. So he goes for a really, what is sometimes called a very Victorian Protestant vision of Buddha, relatable human character, where all the miracles or the supernatural tends to be discarded or toned down. So he goes for a Western vision of Buddha, adapts it in a stunning graphic narrative where the Naga, in this sequence, there should be a Naga taking the plate of the Buddha to be, is not drawn. Every supernatural element, God Indra, leading to the middle way is only sketched, not fully drawn, as in most illustrations, so he's toning down everything. And it's interesting as we go to other hermits in his adaptation of Samat Jataka, which is an essential Jataka that was used at the time to enforce or to have a message about respecting parents, respecting authority, and so on. In his adaptation, he is again toning down elements. Saka is almost not visible, it's just shadows. And I'm making a link to my actual research. After 6 years researching Thai comics, I decided to start researching about Burmese comics and Myanmar comics. Ubachi, a major Burmese artist, will adapt the same stories a decade later, but we can see here that they is highlighting everything supernatural. The reason is that Thailand is promoting a rationalized version of Buddhism to appear civilized again. And then Burma, getting out of colonization, go for a very supernaturalized Buddhism with the nat cult, all the magic features, supernatural creatures, and so on. And one of my favorite panels is this one, the Kinari as a wet nurse feeding Sama. And we can see these amazing difference in the Jataka narrative. The parents of Sama are healed. There is a miracle at the end. They are blind and they can see. But all these miracles are discarded in the version of Mvejakon. So we can really see that he's toning down everything that might seem like supernaturalism, while Ubachi is doing the exact opposite. Everything is relying on the miracle, on meditation, which was really important in Burma, in Myanmar at the time and still today. The importance of meditation. One, the parents are cured, the miracle is happening, and there is also a major difference in the depiction of the king figure. In Mvejakon version, everything, the responsibility of the king itself is toned down, probably by respect, seen in context by respect to the king figure, while in the Burmese Myanmar version, it is quite the opposite. The king is really depicted as a ruthless ruler all along. Just to make a side note on my current research. Then there is Prayun Chanyawongse, the king of Thai cartoons, fascinated here with Walt Disney and here with soon-to-be Prime Minister Kukit Pramuch in this image practicing Like. Prayun is a fascinating artist, one of the one that I'm the most in admiration. He created in 1939 Shontakarop, which is a cartoon Like. He decides to merge Like theater and comics together. So here it's the classic story of Prince Shontakarop with his wife Prince Mora. And they decide to swim. They swim, but suddenly we discover that this is a giant aquarium that is set on a stage, and we are not in a folk tale, we are in a Like representation with a stage, so he's breaking literally the fourth wall, ending up in the Like audience, and then we go back as if nothing happened within the folk tale. And what Prayun is doing, that is that every 2 or 3 pages, he is breaking the fourth wall, going back and forth inside of the folk tale, and then back on the Like stage, and so on, which is fascinating and predates what Americans will do with Mad Magazine, for instance. And this is really, I think, Prayun was one of the most creative cartoonists of his generation on the global level. And yeah, that I can skip. And also, he introduces make an adaptation of Onwishai Kawi, and really interestingly depicts the Hermit as a holder of knowledge, because he has here an academic cap, turns Onwishai and Kawi in little boys, but interestingly, Onwishai becomes a cowboy, because he was a calf, and Kawi becomes a cowboy, and Onwishai, who is the cub, is turned into a scout, because in Thailand the scouts are called the tiger cubs. So he's playing with these elements, playing with anachronism. He's really creative and making this interesting link between knowledge, respecting the holder of knowledge, respected figure that is the hermit, with the Boy Scouts. Boy Scouts, again, are essential in the work of Tukata, the best-selling author of the 1950s, creating cartoon Tukata magazine and enforcing moral lesson topics beneficial for society. He is also driven by the Scout ideal and Scout values, and decides to make 10 rules in the first issue of Tukata around 1955. Avoid coverage of monarchy, politics, religion, real-life characters, disrupting harmony, and so on. His followers, the success of Tukata means to Jungjin and Watana, the baby magazine, and we can see they decide to go back because Tukata decide to set everything in contemporary Thailand, which was really groundbreaking from the time. But soon after, the followers go back in time, decide to mention or set their stories in Ayutthaya time. And we all again have the hermit, figure of wisdom, and we have a buffoon. It's a talking monkey in front, providing humorous elements. In this story, which is the story of three brothers falling in love for the same princess, they will fight to get the love of that princess, but in the end, it is the young hermit named Tama who is considered the one who should be marrying the princess, because he's the one that is worthy, because he's following the path of values, morality, and so on. And again, the clown buffoon figure allows for anachronism. He's at some point during a fight, Ayutthaya-like fight, he's able to get a machine gun. So always the clown figure, the buffoon figure allows for these kind of asides and anachronism. Rong Ratchabumi, a Thai artist who will be hired in 1955 by USIS, the United States Information Service, to work as a translator, will create comics. And now what gets really interesting, of course, is the interest for American superheroes and the fight against communists. And what is really striking is that this young boy dreams to fight for his country, defend Thailand against the invaders, and the hermit that comes to give the power is actually saying "hello boy," but a transliteration of the English text, which means that either it's an American hermit bringing candies that will give him superpowers, but it's an interesting thing. It's that, and also that we are in a superhero tale, which is trendy at the time, but still the hermit figure is there, and it's the hermit that comes, consider the boy, says, you are worthy, I'm going to give you the power, but this hermit is first addressing the boy in English, like if he was maybe an American agent of the USIS, who knows. So this will be seen, amazing cover, one I love. It's the Atomic Yak, and also Invasion of Aliens, which are all actually linked to these ideas of invasion from communism, the menace that we have to fight against. That is something, borrowing superheroes, Captain Marvel will be turned into Asawin Saifa. And again, even if it's a superhero story, the character who decides or to say, you kid are worthy, you are pure-hearted, you are good enough to be turned into a superhero, is the hermit figure, which remains constantly along the years. And then we enter, this is the amazing work of the designer of my book, Pirapat. So we go from the epic tales up to the dark times of the protests. And the hermit will reappear, but now with a completely different face. These is comics published in a student pamphlet in 1973, which shows a king and queen telling the prince that he should learn about peace and the constitution, get peace and the constitution. So the prince goes to see the hermit, who is the one who should be bringing knowledge, wisdom, peace, and the constitution. The students learn, ask for the new constitution, but the Hermit says, no, you still have to wait 3 more years before a new constitution. Then the student ask again, and it's 6 more months. And the Hermit gets tired and decides to jail the prince, which is, of course, an allegory of the time and about the request of the new constitution by the students and how it failed to be at the time, and shows again that the Hermit figure in comics is that really conservative image. So he's the holder of Thai values, moral values, and conservative message, as we can see in this depiction. Then the cartoon Lemlabat explosion. The cartoon Lemlabat, you might know, are these comics sold one bat. Mostly, sorry for that. Mostly they are known for the ghost and gory content, but they actually started in the mid-1970s by being adaptation of classic folktales again. So in a time of turmoil, of anxiety, violence, the cartoonists and audience went back for something that was probably really comforting, classic folk tales or stories of the adaptation of the Jataka, for instance. And the Hermit will reappear again. So in this narrative, here it's Elvis Presley-like hero, because there was an obsession with Elvis Presley at the time. The Hermit will have the same role. He will train the prince to be a good ruler and a good fighter. In this story, which is quite surprising, the Hermit is fighting a yogi, and the yogi was decapitated, but his head still is able to fight. And they will manage to, the Hermit managed to win, helping his young apprentice, the prince. The Hermit here is married to a female monk, Meishi, I think, Meishi, and they have 2 children. But again, and what is really important in all the cartoon Lemlabat I've seen, except for one, but for on hundreds, there was only one exception. All of these stories are always bringing karmic justice, which I think was really essential for the readers of the time, facing so much injustice as migrant workers or people working in Bangkok and so on. They faced a lot of injustice and powerlessness, and all these narratives were bringing a sense of justice. And another adaptation of Sutsakorn by a famous cartoon Lemlabat artist, Ratri, but here he is combining. Okay. So here he is combining the buffoon character with the Hermit in one. It's actually here the Hermit who is making reference and anachronism, saying that Tsakon should, where is it, somewhere here, it is, should be learning Muay Thai, Karate, Judo, and in this page the Hermit says that when he was young he was so smart and beautiful that a film agency, a casting agency asked him to be part of a film, which doesn't make sense in a Sutsakorn narrative, but here, interestingly, they are merging the buffoon and the Hermit in one character. And all this production will be criticized and pushed aside, and parents will prefer educational comics, which will thrive in the 1970s with Chayopruk magazine, and here it's a beautiful page of the story of Praya Pichai Dapak fighting against the Burmese. And Rong Prasanabon, editor of the magazine and author of this page, said we should create our own characters and learn from them. We shouldn't follow foreign comics too much, or else we would lose our identity. The art style might become more international, but the story should still relate to us. We can change, but something must remain from the roots of our ancestors, such as the stories from Thai literature. But surprisingly, saying that, there is a paradox, which is that he adapts a classic tale of resistance by borrowing elements from Asterix and Obelix. This is a classic fight from Asterix and Obelix. All the horses are the horses drawn by Goscinny that he is borrowing, and which makes a really interesting transfer, ideological transfer, because Asterix and Obelix are fighting, are resisting against the invasion of the Roman Empire, and he used that style in a story which is telling the fight of the Siamese against the invading Burmese. So it's always many layers that are interesting. In there, Triam Chamchuporn, my favorite Thai cartoonist who died in an accident at 40, way too young. Beautiful depiction, so again, Thai literature is always there. What is more surprising is that the technique that he is using, that Triam is using, beautiful ink wash, is inspired by Vampirella. So he's using the technique from José González, who was famous worldwide for his ink wash, and he will use that ink wash technique, but use it to highlight religious illustration, which seems again awkward, but works quite well in the end. And one hermit that is missing is the hermit at the end of the story of Maya Janaka in the version of King Bhumibol. As you know, he made an adaptation of he wrote a version of the Maya Janaka in 1988, then requested it to be adapted in a comics format, and he will participate in the process of the adaptation of the text into a comics, because he thought that a comics version would reach a larger audience. And with Chairachawat, again, we have interesting anachronism. And what is interesting is at the end of the tale, King Bhumibol decides that Maya Janaka is not going to retire as an hermit in the forest. In the version of King Bhumibol, the king decides to stay in the kingdom and create the Ruesi Institute to educate all people. So it's an interesting story where the classic hermit disappears, but it also has an interesting, I think, message there that I'm not going to develop. And manga arrives, and there is the Tom Yum Kung crisis at the same time, and in a time of need, when people are lost, we go back again to the same folk tales, the same narratives, which are highly comforting. And after the disappointment in liberalization, neoliberal globalization, market economics, and so on, there is in 1997, 1998, a strong push for a return to Thai roots. And without surprise, 1999, 2 years after the crisis, we have Crichton, the crocodile crisis, where the Thai hero somehow fight the crocodile crisis of global economy in a subtle way. And again, Ognvishai Kawi, but again seen through a new style, here borrowing from Hong Kongese comics that were popular at the time. Amazing transformation of the tiger and the cow in these pages, really stunning. And the hermit is there again, but with a new, more fitting of the time aspect. And that's going to reach right away my conclusion, because I'm already late. Something that Gary Karkin and my colleague Ajahn Osukanya Sumpibon said about Like theater, popular theater, is that humorous interruption and aside tended to enforce the status quo by bridging the ancient princely tales and their conservative messages to the contemporary life of the audience. And I think their observation applies quite well to comics, which were used mostly as a mass media of entertainment, mostly to convey a very conservative message. Is it published by Thai Thai Watanapanish or other educational publishers. They are used and really present, play with that, those values, the Hermit that remains central over the decades, that is slightly changed to follow the trend. So he has a robe, a tiger robe that can change its stripes, but he remains there. He's resilient because he showed the resilience of Thai culture, Thai tradition, and he appears in either superhero version or manga version or Hongkongese version. He stays there always, and I would say thanks to the clown figure, the buffoon figure, he is able to always remain up to date, linked to the present time all along through anachronism that we can see in all these comics along the way as superheroes, manga characters, and so on. And all that goes into the following of the civilized process and of the cultural mandates, which uplifted the national spirit and moral code and instilled a sense of adaptability and newness in Thai life. So that is for the mainstream part, where the Hermit figure remains that bastion, that citadel of Thai culture, roots and values. And it also is going to be used on the other side by the protest, because comics are really strong and effective in underground and counterculture. Also, as we see, I didn't develop about the new generation, but there will be a new indie generation in 1997 who will also go against the cliché and stereotypes of Thai culture and promote a Thai way of life rather than Thai culture, as they will say. And this is not new. Is it in the Praprawet? We can see here a soldier in full modern uniform holding a machine gun, yet protecting kingship and Buddhism, again bridging past and present, or updating these old tales with new techniques or new appearances. And all that and more or less is in my book. So thank you very much.
Questions. Let me try one. You know, the Hermit is in a sense quite a surprise, because here he's becoming very much, you say, Thai conservative values, and he's giving advice. But traditionally, of course, the Hermit is Indian rather than Thai, and he's, as you say, he educates, but he is not like a monk or an abbot giving advice, generally. He's an educator, or he's a practitioner of magic. You know, how does he get turned into this rather different form in the comics, do you think?
Wow, okay. Good question. I was expecting no less from you, Chris. How is he turned? Well, I don't know. The first time I see him with this idea that he is, he's educating the children because they are the future of the nation and so on, is coming in Sawas Jutarop in 1936. I haven't seen before that any examples of the Hermit being used that way, but starting there, it seems that it's really going to keep that shape. So I would say that it seemed to be really informed by the context, by the rise of nationalism, what is happening in Germany, the Japanese empire expanding, and so I think at some point he becomes that. So what is fascinating with comics is that they are produced, they are highly democratic in terms of production. And these were produced daily, so one day he would draw a page, it's going to be published the next day, which is quite amazing because it's different from novels or movies, which requires a lot of time of production. So they were, and that is something that's what Savage Draped is doing a lot. He's doing a lot of these asides and small commentaries about politics and about global situation, context, and so on, and which Prayun is going to really explore fully in Cartoon Like. But I think as he is producing these comics, and because they were all political cartoonists or editorial cartoonists and so on, I think he's seizing an opportunity, maybe in that comics, maybe it happened just before, to use it as a commentary on the time and what is happening. And something that is quite improvised because they were improvising most of these stories, so day by day they come up with a new page, following slightly the original tale. And yeah, I think, and that's the first time, and I don't know if he's the originator, but as they are always using these comics to make comments about present time, at some point I guess he, because of the context, used it and was reused later. That's the best I can do so far. Maybe more research will help.
I had a comment about maybe a third of the way through when the hermit has the two kids, and it's the cowboy and
Yes.
the Cub Scout. I noticed that the hermit in those panels looks very much like Groucho Marx, and specifically Groucho Marx from a movie where he's wearing a cap and gown. But in that context, in the movies, Groucho Marx is lampooning the establishment. He's making fun of the conservative powers that be.
Yeah, it is the same here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
It's very cool. No, that's I just hadn't known if you didn't state the connection.
Yeah, it is because I didn't show, I didn't go into detail. So Prayun will have a lot of troubles, and he will be censored, and he will ask to stop his comics production because he had a success nationwide. He was using Like to actually highlight the corruption in the government, the power abuses, and so on. So the dictatorship will ask him to stop working. He will say no. They will threaten his colleagues, and then he will stop because he is afraid that his colleagues would be hurt or injured because he is not stopping. When it was about him, he didn't care, but when it was for his colleagues at the newspaper, he decided to stop, but decided to draw his character with the lips shut so that it would reveal that he's working under censorship, which was really smart. Then the dictator is going to ask him to stop to do that, and he's going to draw a mustache instead, showing that the mouth is shut but couldn't be attacked as the sewn lips. So he's against, I don't think that, I think that Prayun was a conservative, but who was actively protesting against the power abuse of the dictatorship. He was, I think, conservative, but couldn't stand the abuse of the government and decided to go against it. So it's, I think it's here something that is a bit mixed. And yes, it might be a reference to Groucho Marx. He was making a lot of, it's like in Asterix and Obelix. For me, the comics from Prayun are the closest thing I know to Asterix and Obelix, who are also playing with a lot of reference. So this might be a direct reference to that film. And at the same time, so he's using comics to go against, and also outlawed. So he was, there are parts were progressive because he was also fighting against some outdated laws, if I recall. But at the same time, he's playing with this figure of Scotism's values because he really believed in also pure-hearted young kids and children, and that should be raised in the moral values of Thai culture, Thainess, and so on. So there is a conservative part and a more challenging part to pray.
Hi, I'm just taking a look at one of those. I think one of the comics by Sawat Jutarop, and then one of the things that it was very odd to me was when you talked about how sometimes there'll be like I think a buffoonish character just brings up a contemporary event just in the middle of the story.
Yes.
How often does that happen? Like I think we was talking about air bombings or air raids or something like that in the middle of the story, and I thought it was.
So
I think it's sort of intriguing, so I was wondering how often does it happen?
So it is not happening a lot. So these are, in the work of Sawas Jutarop, these are exceptions. That he actually breaks the narrative, and then we have actually a central panel which is a trick to make diversion or to mislead the spies on the Thai soil. This is really unique. To that extent, that is the most extreme I've seen. Usually, he plays, so the one I didn't show, so he's doing this. That is the first, that was the only page that was remaining then. They were robots. I couldn't get why there would be robots in Onwishai, Kawi, and Ayutthaya. And then it was 1936. I thought this must be American comics. 1935, started to research all American comics from 1935. Found out that indeed there was Tiny Tim, completely forgotten comics. In 1935, that was using the same robots with pickle orb and light rays, that he actually borrowed them. I guess it's too striking a coincidence. And American comic strip were available in Siam at the time, so he might have access to that, but decides to turn them into these robots. He's making a nice change. He's adding chain mails at the legs to give them a more medieval feel because it's Ayutthaya setting. And but these robots, why? It's because it fits the narrative. Onwishai and Kawi are using tamarind leaves that they turned into an army of invincible soldiers. And that is in the original folktale. And the idea of Sawas Jutarop is to think, okay, invincible soldiers, what could it be interestingly visually? And he decides to borrow robots, turn them into the invincible army of Onwishai and Kawi, slightly changing the legs into chainmail so that they best fit the setting. But these are all elements, so borrowing modern elements, turning them, but only if they fit the narrative. All the time, every time, in superhero stories, in manga adaptation and so on, Thai artists are only borrowing what fits the narrative. They don't just, he's not going to just put a car there because he think, oh, a car that might be fun. No, it needs to have a meaning. So it's really a selective adoption. Just the face of Popeye, but just the face, nothing else. Just something that might work, might be appealing, interesting, creating these bridges between past and present, and they would that so many times. But this one is the most extreme I've seen. Usually it doesn't break that clearly.
Thank you for your talk, Professor. I was wondering, you spoke about government reaction and censorship and artist reaction in turn. I'm wondering if there are clear trends that you found in your research about reader reaction as the 20th century goes on. Kind of how, I know you mentioned in the 70s sort of a shift amongst parents towards wanting educational comics, but do you find that as mainstream comics in particular get more or less attention from the government, that readership is changing over time as well, and that whether it's parents or the audience for these publications, like, is there a public reaction to themes as those change over time?
Okay, yeah, good question. So the shift. So before 1970s, comics and cartoons were created by kings, by noblemen, by highly educated people, journalists, and so on. So they were actually made by the elite of the country for adults most of the time, not for children. But like everywhere, mostly everywhere in the world, like for instance the United States, starting with the 1960s, there is a growing fear of comics by conservative educators who starts to see comics as too effective, too challenging to their education system. So they decide to do autodafé, so they start burning comics in the United States in 1950s and 1960s in public places, which is crazy to think. Because comics are too difficult to control, there will be a clear movement. So the American government will decide to make not an audit, I don't know, so they will make that big Senate meeting, and they will ask the comics publisher to self-censor themselves, so that American comics publisher could not deal with a wide range of comics and were forced to actually tone down the content and make it more child-friendly. So the government actively pushed the comics down because comics are a threat to the status quo in the 1950s, 1960s, which happens in Thailand slightly later in the mostly 1970s, partly because the government is also aware that comics are too effective. They know that because they were using to make anti-communist propaganda with USIS, so they were actively creating their own comics against the communists that they would spread in all Thailand, because they know that it's effective. The problem is when it's used by the opposite camp, challenging their authority, and so they need to suddenly discredit it. Chulalongkorn University will do in 1980, I think, a symposium to discuss about the cartoon Lemlabat production, how it affects children. So educators are again panicking because this is the millions of cartoon Lemlabat when produced. It was impossible to exert a control on that production, and it's always the time when the government and educators starts to panic because it's not possible to control that very effective medium. And so there will be again publication, parents that will come together, request that these comics are forbidden because they are affecting children, and so on. And then there is the rise of the middle class in the 1970s, and the middle class is aiming at going up the ladder, and they think that the true arts enjoyed by the elite are fine arts, painting, books that are not mixing words, pictures together. And so I think the middle class is also going to avoid giving comics to their children because they don't think it's befitting raising social class at the time. And yeah, there will be a shift in the perception of comics at that time, actively or unconsciously, both at the same time. Yes.
In your study of this, did you find that the government is also encouraging some other kind of comics apart from Rama VI to counter some of these, more radical idea or kind of anti-establishment? There are some undercurrent of anti-establishment view from some of these comics, right? Mm-hmm. And is there an attempt on the part of the government, other than Rama VI, who encouraged some other people to counter? So that's what first question. And the second is, did you try to track the history of some of these people? What kind of their life background, and how do they come to enter these kind of activities?
Yeah.
You can tell us some interesting story about them.
Okay. Interesting stories about them. So what is interesting, for instance, having Sawas Jutarop is how he's discovering comics. It's because he's discovering American comics thanks to the newspaper that was the used newspaper that were sent from Singapore to Thailand to be used on markets to actually to wrap the products on the market. So Sawas, as a kid, went to the market, unwrapped these newspapers that were around food or whatever they were buying, and would discover these American strips. And that is one story of how a young kid would discover the comics art form and be impacted. Payut now Krishan, I think it was the similar story. One that I skip so that I can actually show it. Much more dramatic is where is it? Yeah, so in the cartoon Lemlabat production, Jet Market, and that is to show also why cartoon Lemlabat, which are so comics are disregarded, and cartoon Lemlabat are the bottom of the appreciation of comics art in Thailand. But he actually. So in this story, it's a story of a widow, and she lost her husband because he was fighting. He's a Thai soldier who was fighting on the, I think, Cambodian or Lao border. And so she is a widow, she is alone, and three men decide to go break, rape her, and finally kill her. And Jet Market is telling that story, but it's something that is based on his own life, because he was himself a soldier who fought on the Laotian border, and he's actually the only survivor of his squad. And he came back traumatized from the war, and being the only survivor of his own whole unit, and decided to become a cartoonist. And through his comics, he's going to deal with his own trauma, talking about all these people who died and about the violence that he faced. And these comics are really a catharsis of the violence of the time that was usually muted, tabooed. You don't talk about Thammasat massacre, you don't talk about all these things. And so these, and which is really interesting, because 1975, 1976, 1977, most of these comics are dealing with classic folk tales, and suddenly 77, 78, 79, it's the explosion of ghost, gore, violence, and I believe, like it was happening with EC comics in 1950s in the United States, that these comics were a way to release all the pressure, all the violence and all the silence and trauma that they were. So here it's an example of a cartoonist. So I try to dig in the book. It's mostly biographies. There's a lot of artist biographies, but these are examples of Sawas and him, for instance. To answer the first question, which was, except for Rama 6, are there other...
Does the government actually promote particular comics that are conservative?
Yes, so everything by Thai Watanapanish, because they were having a deal with the Ministry of Education, and they will promote all these really Buddhist comics, educational comics, and so on. So that is actively promoted. There were propaganda comics made with USIS, and are there other examples of the Thai government or authorities promoting comics? I think they are promoted, as anti-communist propaganda, and then when it comes to propagate Thai culture, Thai values, respect of the family, respect of the king, and so on. But I don't see other examples, because nowadays for instance, there is no promotion of comics at all.
I also like to answer some of the question in the beginning about the figure of the hermit. Another way to think about it is that he may represent some kind of a village elderly or someone outside the city. You know, the hermit is coming from the forest, is kind of Thuan, outside the civilized city. And of course in Thailand there's the tradition of listening to the elderly, คนแก่คนที่น่านับถือ who are in the village as against the big cities. But of course, as Chris said, the actual hermit itself, that probably come from India. You know, the idea that the hermit would be the teacher of the children of the king, you know, in India, and that kind of way. But I don't think it's the same here. I think it may represent the people from the villages.
Okay. Yeah, just one thing you were mentioning. So in Chayapruk, which was really the magazine where they would try to sell Thainess, the government issued Thainess. There will be Triam I mentioned, and Triam is going to create amazing, daring social comics, and he will decide to create comics that were dealing with dark topics, alcoholism, poverty. He will reveal the dark side of Thailand to children audience, because he believed that children are smart enough to understand what is happening, because they live in the street, so they know that this is happening. He will create these stories, and at some point he will be kicked out. Thai Watanapanish magazine, Chayapruk magazine will say no, this is too far. He is challenging, he is not promoting Thainess or amazing Thailand, he is not promoting a beautiful version of Thailand, and he will hurt himself to the editorial board and will be pushed out. He will leave and create the amazing Benjamin Group, creators of some of the most stunning Thai comics of the 1980s, with a really social undertone. And one of the reasons is because he's an Isan cartoonist. He is the first Isan cartoonist to make it in Bangkok and as an Eastern cartoonist, he is well aware of the injustice in the country and will decide to talk about injustice in Bangkok, in the provinces, everywhere, and that is going to, again, be trouble. Yeah.
That makes me think of, in America, the idea of children being pure and innocent is sort of a modern creation that took place after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the idea of the teenager was sort of developed and sold. Is there a corollary in Thai culture where that just sort of was a modern creation?
Yeah, I think there is nothing like teenager before quite late. I think it's when, I would even say that it's not before 1997 and Joe the Secret Agent by Sutishat Sarabhaiwanish, where they say, okay, we are not going back to the Thai roots because we are globalized, we are going as often to McDonald's than we go to the temple, so we are already something else. We are hybrids, we are, and comes the teenage generation, but I don't see really something like teenager. You are either a kid or you are becoming a prince hero of the adventure, so you remain a pure-hearted kid and then a white knight. But the thing in the teenage in between is something that I don't see in Thai comics much, no. Before 1997, quite late.
About the idea of children being innocent?
Oh, yeah, that is, so there is one, I mean, there is, of course, the exception. So they are pushed to be innocent, but actually when we go there, Sritananchai is evilly adapted, and Sritananchai is probably the worst child ever because he's killing his own brother, infant brother, and then all the adventure of Sritananchai is about deceiving people, being mean up to reaching the palace. So I think there are many tales where children are not innocent at all, and Sritananchai is a really good example of that. And I'm sometimes really surprised that even in the 1960s they were still adapting Sritananchai, showing Sritananchai actually cutting the belly of his brother open to clean him, because his mother said, clean your brother thoroughly, and he's going to open it and clean it inside out, literally, because he's jealous. And so, yeah, there are, I think, like Chuchok in Vesantara Jataka, we have the figure of the perfect, generous prince, and that goes with Chuchok, who is really the opposite, eager to get money, interested in lust and greedy and so on, which makes an interesting and really a counterpart, the good example, the bad example, and I think there are either perfect kids or completely horrible children that are the thing you shouldn't do. It's to be Sritananchai.
Thank you very much to Nicolas for that wonderful talk, and I urge you, if you haven't done, to read the book, because I think he's given you a taste of it, that it's a really superb production and absolutely and completely unique, I think. Yeah. So we have a small present for you. We have to have a photo of this. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much to Nicolas. Thank you.